What's going on, everybody? Yes, it is your second helping of me, myself, and I, your connoisseur of critical thinking, your man with the most numbers here on Mojo 50 Radio. I, Andrew Coppins, back at it after an hour break between the Pat Oney Show appearance with the one and only Matthew Holloway and myself. But welcome in to my little corner of the Mojo 50 Radio universe. Critical Thinking is the show. And thank you if you tuned in to the Pat Oney Show on Mojo 50 Radio, or you saw the Pat Oney Show for the very first time, mind you, alongside Matthew Holloway of the HollowNet program, which will air in its entirety after this very program. But I'm flying solo here for you. So let the millennial conservative resistance continue here on Mojo 50 Radio, mojo50.com, Spreaker, iHeartRadio for those that like to listen, and for those of you who like to watch the show. And I highly recommend doing this because you'll see information that you don't get or will not be able to fully comprehend via the radio programming. But anyway, you can follow this program on the video side over at the Mojo 50 Radio Facebook page. Again, you can listen via iHeartRadio, Spreaker, mojo50.com. Don't forget, following me can be done on the socials at The Coppins Show and my YouTube page. Just type in Andrew Coppins in the search bar on YouTube. You will find the Critical Thinking Show page there. Hit subscribe and that notification bell because, folks, the more you subscribe, the more this show and the morsels of critical thinking, the smaller 10-minute little segments that I give you each Tuesday and Thursday, will come to you without you having to search it out. Yes, hitting that notification bell does the trick. And the more of you that are subscribing, the more I can actually provide content to you. But what's coming up on today's show? Well, apparently science only matters when it can be used to scare you. We're going to talk about data around coronavirus because, well, I'm a data nerd. And of course, there's some very interesting data that has come out over the past week. I talked about a little bit of that around Wisconsin and the elections over on the YouTube page. Again, that's youtube.com. Search Andrew Coppins or go to my Twitter page. You'll see it in the bio there. But beyond that, the socialists are apparently reveling in the mire of 26 million unemployed Americans. What's that all about? But first, if you know anything about me, I am an absolute sports nerd. I mean, you can kind of see it right over there. But I've spent the better part of a decade, in fact, an entire decade of my life writing about the Wisconsin Badgers, covering things like the Big Ten Conference. Yes, going to a Big Ten football championship game as an accredited member, a credentialed member of the media. I've written about soccer clubs, whether that's Tottenham Hotspur or Celtic FC, my two favorite clubs in the entire world. And I've even written about a World Cup. Yes, that 2014 World Cup. So it's safe to say that the last few days have been like a kid in the candy store with the NFL draft, because it is the only live sporting thing that has really gone on. Sorry, WNBA draft, you don't count. But it has literally been the only reasonable live sporting event that has happened since the lockdown has shut down the NHL, the NBA, and MLS, and soccer leagues across Europe, cricket, and Aussie rules football. Any sort of morsel of live sports has not been happening. So we got the NFL draft taking place. And the ratings from Thursday night, the first round of the NFL draft, were through the roof as expected. 15.6 million people. 15.6 million people tuned in on ESPN or ABC to catch the NFL draft. That's insane, folks. That is absolutely nuts. That is on par with people, viewing regular NFL programming throughout the season. That's absolutely astronomically insane, but that tells you how much people miss sports and entertainment in general. So I wanted to go through some of my thoughts there. But before we go in depth into the NFL draft, I don't know about you, but one way to get through the NFL draft is to have a few beverages. And, what better way to chill those beverages than with cat coolers? Catcoolers.com. You can go there. They are dependable, durable, rough, rugged coolers. You can sit it outside like I do on a balcony, allowing me to use nature and allowing me to save space inside my home. So keep your beverages cool up to 7 days, folks, up to 7 days just by itself. Keep that icy cold. Keep those beverages cold. Enjoy the NFL draft. Go to catcoolers.com. Get yourself, I think it's the 27, 55, and 87 quart or 88 quart coolers. Folks, these are not your $30 Igloo coolers. These are rugged, dependable, durable, long-lasting coolers that keep beverages cold, keep the hot stuff hot for up to 7 days. So, again, catcoolers.com. So use that promo code MOJO50 while you're at catcoolers.com. Let them know that we sent you there. But let's get into the NFL draft here. I've got a few thoughts, and one of them is actually on the team that I love the most, the wonderful Green Bay Packers. But what I wanted to talk to you about first is how this virtual draft, because it's very different, right? The last few years, or really almost the last decade, the NFL has gone live, and the NFL has gone out into the communities of their teams for the draft. And that did not happen for obvious reasons in Las Vegas. They lost out on their ability to have the NFL draft. That was never going to be fun for them. So with that happening, it was a virtual draft. How was that going to take place? Well, Roger Goodell was in his office or wherever in his home that he was. They set up virtual things for fans to be involved. They set up, cameras everywhere for potential first and second round draft picks and yada, yada, yada. But my first thought is, my God, is Roger Goodell a robot? That guy is awful in front of camera. And it can be hidden when you're in bigger environments with fans booing or cheering and all of the pageantry that is around the picks. But when it's him sitting like I am in front of you, looking into the camera, when that is going on, he is god awful. And I'm not saying I'm always the most natural person on camera, because that's really not the case all the time. But I at least have the ability to emote, show some, smiles and eyebrow raises, and actually speak to you in, coherent thoughts. And my passion comes through. Now, that did not happen with Roger Goodell at all. So I asked myself, and I hope to God that you would be asking yourself the same questions here. How is it possible that this guy, who has been the commissioner for over 15 years, cannot figure out how to read off of a teleprompter? A teleprompter. You know that thing where you look into the camera, directly into the lens, and you read the words that are on the screen that's in front of that lens? Like this? This is what Goodell was doing the entire time, and it was painful to watch. And on top of it, he couldn't even get emotion. Now, that is up to two things. One, whoever put that stuff into the teleprompter and didn't let him practice is a moron. Or if he practiced, that guy should never have been the person to do it. He could have done an opening message. He could have done anything. And then you let the people who are naturals on camera, you let fans, or you do something else with introducing the picks. Anywho, besides that, I think it was amazing to get a glimpse as to how these people live. Mike Zimmer from the Minnesota Vikings and his awesomeness. That when you think Minnesota, that was what you would think. The big game on the wall, the big fireplace, the roaring fireplace, and all of those things going. It was fantastic. And then you had Cliff Kingsbury, Sean McVay, and a few others chilling in warm weather conditions. It was fantastic to see that type of their personality. And then you had Mike Vrabel and whatever the heck was going on behind him for the Tennessee Titans. But you had a lot of really fun insight into the personalities of the coaches, the players, the GMs, all of that sort of wonderful goodness. I thought it was amazing to have that virtual draft go without a hitch technology-wise. It was absolutely awesome. Now, with that said, my second thought here. My Green Bay Packers have been the talk of the NFL draft, not only in round 1, not only in round 2, but also in rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the NFL draft here. My Green Bay Packers, wow, on Thursday. Now, I have been a draft nerd, a geek, a data guy since I was a little kid. Sit in front of the television, watch the first round of the draft, the second round of the draft, see where the players are going to go. I would remember stats, I would remember names, I would, all of those sorts of really geeky, nerdy sports things in, earlier on in my life, and I'm still that way today. So I love this stuff. So the other part of this is I sit with my dad, I have a conversation with him either the night before or the day of the draft, and we talk about where the Packers could go, what the possibilities are, some names that I would recommend my dad watch out for, do some research on, people that, positions we might pick, what we might do. Well, in talking to my dad, one of the scenarios I had at play in my head was, well, Aaron Rodgers is not getting much younger. I really couldn't name the backup quarterback, and I am a geek for those things. Now, I know who the backup quarterback is, but I would actually have to search in my brain to remember that sort of information. So the point being, I thought that drafting a quarterback, whether that happened in the first round or the second round, was a possibility early on for this team because they need a stable backup right now, and more importantly, they need to draft for the future at that position. If they believed, and I thought this because of the way Brian Gutekunst and everybody else around the draft in Green Bay was talking, you heard them mention quarterback. What did they do? They go and they draft Jordan Love out of Utah State, the fourth quarterback, I should say, to come off the board. This was a guy that many people thought could go in the 10-15 range, but he's still sitting there as 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 come off the board. What do the Packers do? They evaluated that position. They determined that this is a person that they felt was the best available person. They go and draft him, and the Packer Nation goes nuts. What are you doing? We've got Aaron Rodgers. You need all of these other people, all of these other positions, right? Well, I absolutely love the pick, unlike so many in Packer Nation. You see, Matt LaFleur gets an opportunity to groom the quarterback that he wants to lead this organization. And let's be real here, folks. Aaron Rodgers is 36 years old, going to be 37 by the end of this season, and he has spent the better part of this last half decade injured. And not just nagging injuries. I mean seriously injured. He is one more injury away from becoming a retired NFL player. And we have nothing. So I love this pick because if you roll the dice on Aaron Rodgers staying healthy, and he does stay healthy, Jordan Love gets to sit and learn. Jordan Love gets to, really work on the things that he needs to work on to become a masterful NFL quarterback. And if it doesn't work in 3 years' time, you can roll the dice again and see if you come up with, aces. I don't disagree with this pick at all. I think this is the smartest move they could have made because you look at all the wide receivers that were coming off the board, you were going to be reaching for that position at that point in time. Then in round 2, the fans go nuts again. A.J. Dillon, the running back from Boston College, is the pick. A workhorse, a bell cow. Matt LaFleur comes from the Tennessee Titans, my friends. And if you know anything about what the Tennessee Titans offense was predicated on, you just need to look at Derrick Henry, a bell cow, physical, but deceptively fast running back. And the physicality of that offense in Tennessee is what Matt LaFleur wants to bring to the Green Bay Packers. He gets that running back in A.J. Dillon, but more importantly, Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, the two-headed monster that they ran with for most of last season. They have been injured. They have been injury-prone. They've been productive, but they're also, after this upcoming season, after the 2020 season, are both up for contract renewals. You get A.J. Dillon, who is the bell cow back that you've been working with. You get some multiple weapons in that backfield again, and you allow yourself the flexibility to allow one of the two guys, whether that's Jamal Williams or Aaron Jones, to walk. You don't have to pay them. You get some flexibility in your position group, and you get an quality running back. You cannot have enough of them in the NFL right now. We have seen how you can use guys like Aaron Jones in multiple ways. At times he was really the guy who was carrying that offense last season. So you allow multiple sets in your offense. You allow different things to happen. This is great news. Then they go out and get a massive tight end in the 3rd round. A lot of people didn't like it because why are you wasting this on a tight end? Jay Sternberger is potentially good, but you get yourself another weapon. You can use multiple sets. You could split one of them out. You can do all sorts of really cool things in this offense. This was all about getting offensive weapons because they have focused on the defensive side of the ball in certain aspects in free agency. So ultimately for me, this is all about one thing and one thing only. This is about setting yourself up for the future. And that future may not long-term be Aaron Rodgers. Folks, if you're a Packer fan like I am, I'm begging you, hear this message, okay? Do you want Tom Mikowski, Anthony Dilweg, Randy Wright, Lynn Dickey over a decade? Or do you want to set yourself up for another situation in which you transition from Hall of Fame quarterback to Hall of Fame quarterback to potential, because I'm not ready to say Jordan Love is a Hall of Fame quarterback in waiting. We never thought that Aaron Rodgers was going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback in waiting. We thought he had potential to do that. So do you set yourself up that way, or do you roll the dice 3 or 4 years from now and hope to God you hit? And if you miss, you sink your franchise completely. I beg you to think of those two scenarios. We have been lucky to go from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, but the truth of the matter long-term in the NFL is there are far more organizations who don't go from a Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. They go from Brett Favre to the number 1 overall draft pick or multiple years top 5 in reaching for quarterbacks time and time again. We don't want to go back there. So hopefully this situation sets itself up that way. And if it doesn't, 3 years from now, there's no skin off of the Packers' back. They can go out and draft another quarterback and take another bite of the apple. I love this entire setup of the draft for the Green Bay Packers. Now, there are things that maybe people don't like about Jordan Love. I happen to think you throw the 2019 season out the window, look at 2018, you see a team that has many more weapons around him, and you see a much more productive player. But let's get out of the realm of sports and let's get on to talking about. So folks, part of America are looking to reopen in the coming days while other parts of the country are actually locking down even more, including my home base of Illinois. But I want to talk about unemployment because we saw another 4.4 million people become unemployed, pushing the total over the last 5 weeks to 26 million people unemployed. That's insane. Over 26 million unemployed people here in America. But what I want to talk to you about is the fact that for a lot of people who are unemployment, it's actually a boon to their bottom line. And for businesses, it's created a very large problem. And I can tell you right now that, obviously unemployment is not going to be there forever, but I am earning more money on unemployment by a pretty significant amount than I was in a 40-hour-a-week day job doing analysis, in working in a blue collar or a white collar setting, shall I say. So that should tell America a lot. That should tell you a lot when I can earn significantly more on the unemployment scheme that has been set up. So folks, we're going to go to this article from our friends over at CNBC. As you can see, this is an article from Greg Achuri. Hopefully I didn't, totally butcher that name. But it says she got a forgivable loan. Her employees hate her for it. So the article says, Jamie Black Lewis felt like she won the lottery after getting 2 forgivable loans through the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP. Black Lewis saw the $177,000 and $43,800 loans, one for each of the spas that she owns in Washington State, as a lifeline she could use for payroll and other business expenses. That means keeping her employees employed long term. They have a way to do that. She had already helped to pay for the 35 employees, including herself, at these spas. Well, when Black Lewis convened a virtual employee meeting to explain her good fortune, she expected jubilation and relief that paychecks would resume in full. She got a different reaction. It was a firestorm of hatred about the situation. So what you need to know is that there is an unintended consequence of the $2.2 trillion coronavirus relief package enacted last month. The law, the CARES Act, offered $349 billion in loans. That's all great, right? Well, it turns out that when you take the PPP, when you take those loans, you have until June 30th to rehire laid off or furloughed workers. If not, those loans are not those loans become unforgivable. Those loans must be repaid. So she is between a rock and a hard place because for the people who she employs that she had to furlough, what happens here? Well, it's a windfall that they see coming in unemployment. In their mind, she is taking away extra money out of their pockets. Now, it's a very short-term situation. It's short-sighted from those employees, and I want to be abundantly clear on this. That is totally short-term. Black Lewis points out that not only is it short-term, but it creates a divide between owners and workers that were unnecessary. And why? Because the wonderful idiots in Congress could not figure out a possible way for them to come up with a formula that would have allowed people to be made 100% whole of their full salary. Instead, it was just a blanket $600 on top of whatever came in the form of unemployment on a state-by-state level. It should have been really easy. What is the state unemployment insurance rate? Here in Illinois, it's somewhere around 40%. Okay, so what is your salary on a yearly basis? Input that information, input your yearly salary, input what you made in your tax return from this past year. Input that information and voila, guess what ends up happening? You just take 60% of that plus the 40% for unemployment insurance, and you got your formula for being made whole. Instead, for people like me, I'm making significantly more because they just said $600. It's absolutely insane what these individuals in Congress decided to do. They're wrecking the economy while thinking they're saving it. They're wrecking employee-employer relations. And it's time for us to hit a break right here on Mojo 50 Radio, the Mojo 50 Radio Facebook page, and mojo50.com. On the flip side, we will talk about the split, the break, the things that are happening that politicians are taking advantage of when it comes to unemployment in this specific situation, and much more. Again, don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Parlay, Facebook at The Coppins Show. I will see you on the flip side. and welcome back into Critical Thinking. Yes, it is I, your host, Andrew Coppins. One more half hour to go here on your Millennial Conservative Resistance here on Mojo 50 Radio, taking over your Saturday afternoons. And following me is Matthew Holloway, the closer of the Millennial Conservative Resistance. So thank you so much for tuning in as always. And if you're podcasting this and listening not on Saturday afternoon, do not forget you can watch this show on Facebook, on the Mojo 50 Radio Facebook page, but you can also see it in its entirety over on my YouTube channel. Very, very simple. Go to youtube.com. Just type in my name, Andrew Coppins. You will see the show there. Don't forget, you can hit up at the Coppins Show, which you can see right here. Anyway, hit that up for your social media needs. Now, last week left off, we were talking about unemployment and just the simple fact that it's asinine that the government has allowed people to earn more money than they were earning on their paycheck during this pandemic panic. And so for those of us who are earning about or around $22 an hour, there's a lot of people like this. It doesn't pay for them to want to go back to work. Now, the other part of this scenario that's at play, not only is it dangerous for those owners and those business owners who took PPP money, it's not just dangerous for them, it's dangerous for the employee, because here is the ruse, right? Even though you know you're earning more money on unemployment, your employer, if they offer you your job back and you don't take it, you no longer qualify for that unemployment. So your golden goose is cooked in that manner. But we also have a political problem, not just in how they formulated this, but while some are seeing the massive 26 million people unemployed as a big-time problem, well, for some, this is the perfect time to pounce. And by some, I mean Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her merry band of socialist misfits. Yes, that's right, folks. Earlier this week, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or AOC, was caught tweeting and then deleting, and much like the saying about cover-ups, deleting is always worse than the original tweet, but she was caught literally cheering on the demise of oil futures as they went into negative territory. With that comes the peril of many more jobs being lost in the short term. But who cares about that, right? It's all about the ends justifying the means, or in this case, the means justifying the ends. Now, meanwhile, Ted Cruz was actually tweeting the following as well. So, the day after being publicly shamed into not taking $9 million in taxpayer relief funds, Harvard, yes, the college, the university, Harvard details its new policy to try to use its $41 billion endowment. Yes, I said 41 billion with a B. $41 billion endowment to hammer American jobs and defund energy, automobiles, airlines, construction, and manufacturing. Now, why is it important for me to contrast these two when we're talking about jobs and we're talking about all of these things? Well, because they're both attempting to use this crisis for their own political gain, and they're both wrong. Yes, AOC and Ted Cruz are wrong here. For me, AOC is wrong to want to cheer on the demise of jobs in the middle of this crisis at all. Ted Cruz is wrong to attempt to tell a private college what it can do with its endowment fund. Now, this would be different if Harvard University was using the taxpayer money that it does get, if it was using that money to make these types of demands. That would be wrong. But if you are truly libertarian, truly conservative, who are we to tell a private business how to conduct its business? And let's be real, Harvard University is a business. You don't have a $41 billion endowment fund for nothing. So, that business can use its bully pulpit how it sees fit, just like your business can lay out its demands of its people, of its investments at any point in time. It's called culture. You may not like it. You may not enjoy it. But Harvard has the right to do it. Verizon has the right to direct funds how it sees fit. You then have the opportunity to not transact. Okay? It's just that simple for me. It really, really is that simple when we're talking about AOC, Ted Cruz, and the like. But this brings me to a larger viewpoint and a larger point that few want to discuss when it comes to the future of this economy. That also, Ted Cruz is wrong in his assumption that this would be devastating for our economy long term. This is something that I've talked about before. But long term, we have no freaking clue, no clue whatsoever what this is going to look like, what the economy is going to look like, what our world's going to look like in 20, 30, 40 years from now. All you have to do is take this example. If you would have told me on my high school graduation day in the year 2000, and yes, that literally is like Conan O'Brien playing over in my head, but anyway, if you would have told me that a social network would have existed, I would have told you were crazy. But beyond that, that people in colleges would actually offer degrees in social media, whether that's marketing or management or all sorts of things. And there would be jobs in those types of fields around social media. Literally having a social media expert be a thing. And those jobs would be readily available. I would have told you 20 years ago that you were nuts. Absolutely 100% bonkers nuts. But just a half decade after 2000, and Facebook is starting to become a thing. The first social network, the big social network, is becoming a thing. Yes, MySpace is in existence, but the first real building blocks of what we know today to be social networking exists. This place, this company that in 2005 was just a little fledgling startup and it only involved people that had college email addresses, is now a ubiquitous part of the life of the American people today. The vast majority of Americans have Facebook. So, what that tells me is that if we think that we need to protect all the jobs that exist in every industry, all across the landscape today that currently exist in perpetuity, you're nuts. We do not need to do that. It's insane to think that we have that kind of a crystal ball, that we know that we're not going to discover a different fuel source in the next 10 years. That makes oil and all of its byproducts completely obsolete and can power everything that currently is powered at its maximum power velocity without needing to drill for oil and all the safety things that come with it. Who is to say that doesn't happen? You seem to not remember that, oil was not necessarily a thing about 200 years ago. At least a thing that we understood in powering things like it does today. So, I want you to think about this. The truth is the world evolves, new technologies, new discoveries happen all the time, and they render previously important professions, the people that do those jobs, and the earthly commodities because of those jobs, obsolete. We have got to be flexible to change. Ted Cruz, you cannot demagogue on this type of an issue. We have to be willing to embrace change, but we don't need to do it, this is key, by the force of government either, and that is where AOC is also wrong. And what do I mean by this? Because for me, if this change is something that can be widely adopted or it's in demand, companies will spring up to supply that demand. Look at what's happening right now with COVID-19. All the ventilators, all of these companies switching their manufacturing and doing all of these things. If there is a demand, if the technology can be proven, if it can be effective, if it can be mass produced, if it can be something that people can make a profit off of, and yes, profit is not an immoral word. if that is something that can happen. Companies will figure out, companies that are traditional today, GE or somebody else might figure it out. Or there might be a brand new company. I mean, Amazon, hello? Whole industries will spring up that we never knew would be possible to exist. Now, there will be disruption to whole industries, potentially, things like trucking or airline travel and all of that. It could be painful, right? Especially for the people that do not have the ability to learn new skills. There's going to be painful disruption, but just like there's been painful disruption to numerous jobs over the last 20 years. It's insane to think that we need to stay stagnant and that we must protect all of the jobs all of the time. No, we don't. Now, maybe the change is coming too slow for AOC's liking, but doing it before the economy, the infrastructure, and most importantly, the people are ready for that change makes no sense. It absolutely makes no sense. By and large, why can't we just leave Harvard alone to spend or invest its endowment money as it sees fit? Why can't we do that, Senator Cruz? Why is it your job to demagogue them into your way of thinking? If their way of thinking is correct, the investments that they have will provide good fruits of labor. If they're wrong, well, then they wasted a ton of money, in which that is their problem, not yours. Also, by and large, AOC, why can't we allow the economy to dictate the terms of transformation? Why is it the government's job to do this? Now, I know the argument is that we can't afford for the change to organically happen over time because the planet will die. Folks that are over on the catastrophe of the climate change side of things, you've been telling us for the last 20 years that the world's coming to an end. And by the way, you also continue to push the doomsday date further and further and further and further out. By your admission, in 2000, most of this planet today should not exist. So pardon me if I'm not going to take your not so serious data seriously when I speak. But I'm also not going to be stuck in my ways and demand that it's oil or nothing, or coal or nothing, or nuclear energy or nothing. I'm willing to find new ways to power society, embrace the wonders that God's creation has in store for us. I just don't want the government telling me when and how that will happen based off of some junk science from people like Neil Ferguson at Imperial College. Look him up, by the way, because this is the person who not only has been so wrong on the modeling for coronavirus, but also on climate catastrophe as well. Seriously, look it up. Seriously, be prepared for the changing that's coming. And speaking of that, do not forget to head over to mojo50.com. Check out all the wonderful sponsors, but also prepare with mojo50.com, our friends at My Patriot Supply, because right now, in these unstable times, being prepared to be able to feed yourself, because, folks, in 5 or 6 months from now, with all of these meatpacking plants being shut down, with all of the things that are going on, with the inability of farmers to simply plant crops and do the things that need to get done to feed our economy and our people 5 to 6 months from now. So head over to preparewithmojo50.com. Get yourself a 2 or 4 week supply of food. I personally would go with a 4 week supply of food because that will allow you to stretch every single last dollar. And that 4 week plan is $197. Regularly $297, but you can only get that $100 discount by going to preparewithmojo50.com. Again, preparewithmojo50.com. And that is thanks to our friends over at My Patriot Supply. I cannot recommend being prepared for a food shortage enough right now. I cannot recommend it enough. But the opposite of being prepared would be looking in the rearview mirror, and we need to do that. In fact, I did that earlier this week over on my YouTube page when I talked about what we have been able to learn from the data, the deaths, the hospitalizations, the number of cases of COVID-19 around the state of Wisconsin, and why that was important. You're going to have to check that out on the YouTube page. And all I'm going to say on that in one final situation here is that when you look backwards and look at the data and then don't do anything, don't change anything, don't modify anything, you're doing it wrong. And by the way, since the only thing that anybody in the media seems capable of talking about is coronavirus, we've got to do something on it. All right, so what I want to do here is bring in my friend Data to the picture. And Data comes courtesy of our fine friends over at Spiked. Yes, our fine friends over at Spiked give us this piece. And the piece is titled, "There is no empirical evidence for these lockdowns." Now, Spiked is a website that is humanist in nature and really looks at democracy as the best solution. Okay? But this piece tackles the question, okay, whether states that have adopted lockdowns or shelter-in-place orders experience fewer COVID-19 cases and deaths than those which pursue a social distancing strategy without a formal lockdown happening. Now, that is vitally important here, okay? You need to know this. So, he also extended this to compare other countries, but what the conclusion of this is that he does not find that lockdowns are more effective way of handling coronavirus than well-done social distancing measures. The most basic way to test the thesis is by direct comparison. So as of the 6th of April, there were 7 U.S. states that had not adopted shelter-in-place orders, okay? Those were Arkansas, Iowa, Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Utah, and Wyoming. Now, on April 16th, there was an average of 1,321 cases amongst those 6 states. The states also had an average of 22.3 deaths. Now, they also threw in South Carolina, which did not adopt a shelter-in-place order until the 6th of April. And they still allow, most religious services, so that doesn't dramatically alter their figures. So if you throw in South Carolina, the average case numbers are 1,613 with 33 average deaths. So how do those states measure up with the rest of the U.S.? Well, rather than going to, into all the detail here, according to World Meters, what you need to know is that if you remove the outlier of New York State, okay, if you include them, I should say, the average number was 12,520. The average number, okay? Now, the average state number of cases here, 1,613. So if you even remove the state of New York, which represented at the time about half of the cases, okay? All right? If you just average the figure for deaths, okay? Let's remove New York State, okay? It moves it down to 8,408 versus 1,600. And it moves to 342 deaths on average versus 33 deaths. I want you to think about that. That's what is happening here. So an advocate of lockdown, as they point out, could object to the social distancing states because they're little places. But Utah, Nebraska, South Carolina are actually pretty sizable, as they point out. But the next step of his analysis was to adjust for population, because that could be a thing, right? So, in alphabetical order, the 7 social distancing states experienced 12, 19, 11, 12, 8, and 7, or 8, 7, and 3 deaths per million. Again, 12, 19, 11, 12, 8, 7, and 3 deaths per million, for an average of 10 deaths per million when you exclude South Carolina, and 12 deaths per million when you include South Carolina. They compare very favorably to the U.S. as a whole. Across all U.S. states, the number of deaths per million was either 828 in New York to 3 in Wyoming for an average of 69. If you remove New York, okay, the average of cases per million was 1,392, and the average number of deaths per million was 54. What you come up with, okay, is if you include the social distancing states plus South Carolina to the U.S. states minus North Carolina, the social distancing states experienced 663 fewer cases per million and 42 fewer deaths per million on average than the lockdown states. Now, he also ran a regression model where he looked at variables in each state. Things like population density, median income, median age, diversity, measured as a percentage of minorities in a population, the state's COVID-19 response strategy, which was either lockdown or social distancing. So what came about that? Well, the p-value for the variable representing strategy was 0.94, which means there is a 94% chance that any relationship between the different measures and COVID-19 deaths was a result of pure random chance. That means there was a 94% chance that the variable difference was just random. There was no causality, no causation or correlation between the different measures. Now, he goes on to say that the only variable to be statistically significant, if I could speak, in terms of cases, was deaths, was population. Population. So, as he says, across the U.S. states, each increase in the population of 100,000 correlated with 1,779 additional COVID-19 cases, even with multiple other factors adjusted for. Large, densely populated areas are more likely to struggle with COVID-19 no matter what response strategy they adopt. Although erring on the side of caution might make more sense for global megacities like New York and Chicago. Okay? And then he talks about Sweden. And Sweden actually goes on to rank 23rd in terms of cases per million and 10th in terms of cases of deaths per million versus all of the crazy lockdown states all throughout Europe. Okay? So, no single analysis, this is important, can provide truly conclusive answers to questions as huge as those that are posed by COVID-19. Okay? But, what he ends up saying is that the more data, the better. Overall, what he is saying is that the epidemiological information was wrong. But on the whole, what is he saying here, right? That is the important thing. What is this man saying? Okay? So he says, however, as time has passed, new data has emerged. A top quality team from Stanford University has pointed out that the infection rate for COVID-19 must logically be far higher than the official tested rate. And the fatality rate for the virus could thus be much closer to 0.1%, which is where people have the empirical data on the flu, than the 2 to 4% that was initially expected. Those are vastly different pieces of information. An empirical analysis of national and regional response strategies, including this one, do not necessarily find that costly lockdowns work better. Again, do not necessarily find that costly lockdowns work better against the virus than simple social distancing. That is what the empirical data shows us. And I think it's important to note that. It's very important. Now, in the end, what the data continues to show, whether that is the YouTube situation that I showed earlier this week, again, I implore you, check it out, spread that around. It is vitally important information. All it suggests is that people sticking to the social distancing, doing the smart things while they're out in public, not packing in like sardines and all of those types of things, those things are more effective than the complete shutdown of our economy. That's what all of the data says. Yet, in my state of Illinois and in other states, all throughout the Midwest, all throughout the United States, There are states that are not reopening. There are states that are doubling down on their lockdowns. We're going all the way through the end of May, yet this information is out there. How is it possible that they are making scientifically based decisions when this is science? This is data analysis at work, using the data that you're using to propagate shutdown, shutdown, shutdown. It's absolutely nuts. The data tells us that social distancing in public works best. That's what the data tells us. Instead, you just continue down your merry way with the blinders on that you've always had. It's absolutely nuts that the people at the top levels making these decisions are not seeing this information. So I encourage you, look at the Spiked article. It'll be in the description to this show. Look at the data. He actually provides the data, okay, in this article. He provides you with a link to the actual data. Do your own analysis if you want. But I encourage you to spread this information because it's vitally important. We have got to reopen America. We have got to stop being scared. We have got to stop allowing the scaremongers, the fearmongers to win. Spread this information because this is something we have got to win long term. We cannot allow people to just roll us over and expect us to play dead anymore. The information that we get going forward has to be what makes the decisions, has to be what informs these decisions, and yet nobody in power in the vast majority of states is willing to listen to this information. It's asinine. And on that note, folks, thank you so much for joining me here on Critical Thinking once again. I really, really appreciate each and every one of you that listen via podcast, listen live, watch live, take in all of these things. If you're watching live, we're trying out some new things. And, hopefully in the future, we'll get it cleaned up and we'll get it together better, because I can speak English. And on that note, it's time for us to end our time together here this week. Thank you for the 2 hours that some of you have spent with me, myself, and I, and Matthew Holloway. Speaking of which, do not forget you can watch the HollowNet in its entirety after this very program right here on Mojo 50, the Mojo 50 Radio Facebook page, and you can listen via iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and of course mojo50.com. As always, follow me on social media, hit that YouTube channel up, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I cannot implore you enough to spread what we are doing here with critical thinking. Please, folks, you've got to start spreading it because we need to win this information war. We have to win this. Otherwise, we are going to continue to be paralyzed in this country. But until next week, don't forget Matthew 5:44.